Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and this is another episode of Ask the Lawyers. Today, we're going to ask the lawyer about traumatic brain injury, or TBI. And as you can probably imagine, when someone suffers a traumatic brain injury, it's life-altering. But those of us who don't have first-hand experience don't really know much more than that. And that's why we have here to help us understand it is attorney Tom Metier of the Metier Law Firm based in Colorado. Tom has spent more than 30 years achieving victories for brain injury clients. Tom, thank you for making some time for us today. I appreciate it.
Rob, it's a great pleasure to talk to you today.
So we often hear, especially families of those who have brain injuries, that it's like two different lives. There's their life before the injury and then their life after the injury. In your experience, what do they mean by that? What is that like?
Well, you know, when somebody suffers a traumatic brain injury, it actually changes who they are. Our personality, the way we communicate, if we're still able to communicate, how we think about ourselves, whether we're depressed, whether we can find words, whether we can express ourselves in the same way and even have the same feelings we had. Many families experience that the person is not the person they married. That's not the person that was their dad or their mother. And so they must, if you will, fall in love again, get to know the new person, come to understand why that person is so different, and forgive themselves for those moments when they are frustrated or angry with the brain injured person. So it is something that affects the entire family very deeply.
You mentioned frustrations. There must be a lot of frustrations, not only for the families, but for the injured person themselves. What sort of things do they experience and do they go through?
Well, so often they're not able to express themselves in the same way. Their actual sensations as to what they feel and how they feel are changed. So we have responsibilities. You know, if you're a working parent and you need to bring income in, and now you've been injured and you can't concentrate like you did before, you can't perform, you can't express yourself. Oftentimes there are emotional changes. So even how we project ourselves to others is changed. And we may be aware of it, but not able to adjust to it. And so there are things called adjustment disorders, which are psychological depression and reactions to being this new person, to having to learn to live with disabilities, even though we're always hopeful those disabilities will get better. There's a great deal of disruption in our lives, which can be tremendously frustrating. Imagine wanting to say something but not being able to find the words, wanting to relate to your spouse or a child, and not being able to do it in the way you did before. The frustrations can be very deep and long-lasting if they're not properly addressed.
When someone has a bodily injury, a physical damage, other people can see, okay, that person has something that they're dealing with. But I would imagine one of the frustrations with a brain injury is on the outside, it may not be noticeable, correct?
That's absolutely right. We often call brain injury the invisible injury. And oftentimes, for instance, a person may still speak rather well. They may move rather well, but their brain's performance has very much changed. They may have pain syndromes. They may have things that we can't see. So we won't have the type of consideration and patience expressed by others to us if we're a brain injured person. So imagine that if I had an amputated leg and I was permitted to do things like park in the handicapped parking spot, that maybe I didn't move as fast as others. And people would say, well, we understand. We're going to extend a particular kindness or courtesy. But yet you have a brain injured person who you can't see what another person hears. You can't understand what they're perceiving about the world around them because it isn't something that shows on their face. So we tend to expect that they're going to be able to react and perform timely to keep up with the conversation. I mean, one of the things that often happens with a brain injured person is that the speed of processing of their brain is slowed down. So they may drive down an interstate highway at what feels like 80 miles an hour to them, but they're only doing 35 miles an hour because the information flowing in feels like they're going 80, and yet the world around them is moving much faster, and those drivers are honking because they're mad you're going so slow. Well, think about a conversation in which my ability, if I'm brain injured, to have the speed of the words you're speaking, allow me to keep up and understand what you're talking about. You may speak for a 10-word paragraph, and I may only be able to hear the first sentence and a half and process it. So I'm not even following what you're saying. But you, as the person who is not brain injured, are expecting me to keep up. And you start to show frustration because I'm not understanding. And then I feel belittled. I get frustrated. I'm hurt. And I may get angry. And then I get rejected again. Mm-hmm. So there's a great deal to learn about as a family, how to communicate and how to support the person who's injured. And just as importantly, to learn how not to be frustrated ourselves with our brain injured friend or loved one.
Now let's talk about, I imagine there's frustration in this too. We mentioned at the top of the interview that you've had 30 plus years experience dealing with these brain injury cases. What are some of the challenges that comes from challenges you've seen with these brain injury cases and trying to work with them for a legal case that you've experienced over the years?
Well, one of the things is that a brain injury is multifactorial in that it may disrupt the ability to hear in perfect stereo. It may affect vision. It may cause migraine headache syndrome. It may cause memory loss, altered communication, interruption of the ability to get information in, to store information, to retrieve that information and express that information. So one of the things that we have to become very experienced with and have a facility for is helping the brain injured person themselves adapt to their environment and be able to express and communicate to a jury what the effects of that injury are. We also have to put the family unit together in a way that we can understand what the dynamics are and to support that family. You know, to get a case to trial can often take a year or more. And we spend a lot of time with brain injured families, helping them understand and adjust to their new life. We have financial concerns to make sure the family is able to survive even before we can get the case resolved at trial or in settlement. And then, of course, there's the challenges of putting all of the experts together, whether they're treating neurologists or physiatrists, psychologists, psychiatrists, the physical medicine doctors, such as orthopedic surgeons, who also may be involved, or brain surgeons. There is a big cast of people who participate in the treatment and care of a brain injured person. But once the medical side is done, then the law firm often is the one who is responsible for seeing that this family and this brain injured person's story can be told to a jury and get a result, and whether it's through verdict or settlement, that's appropriate so that family can have a bright future and try to get them back to where they would have been had this never happened. So it is like moving an army, quite literally.
It seems that a lot of the things you just mentioned can only come from experience and having done this over and over again. What advice would you have to someone that may be seeking legal help in a brain injury case?
Well, the first thing I think that if I were a brain injured person or a family member trying to find a lawyer is to make sure that lawyer actually has substantial experience and understanding what results they've gotten, meeting with them to understand, are they caring? Can they demonstrate that they understand brain injury? What is their experience in presenting psychological injury. Many times a person with brain injury has post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, in addition to, and depression. And so there's a great deal to understand. Pain exacerbates cognitive deficits or cognitive disability, brain operation disability. Depression can complicate that. Brain injury can cause all of those things. I'd want to know I had somebody who was an expert in headaches as well as orthopedic injury because of the nervous system and its involvement in other injuries that are likely to be involved also for this patient. So I'd want to really understand that the attorney that you are hiring has a team and has competency, as well as being very caring and patient.
Sounds like there's so much more to it than any of us really realized at the beginning. Tom, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate that.
It's been a pleasure, Rob. Thank you.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyers. My guest has been personal injury attorney Tom Metier of the Metier Law Firm based in Colorado. Please take a second and click on the link at the bottom of the screen so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll find out when we have future episodes. And if you want the best information about traumatic brain injuries, or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, please visit AskTheLawyers.com. I'm Rob Rosenthal for AskTheLawyers.com.